If you're a woman over 50 and you keep attracting the same type of man over and over, if every relationship follows the same painful pattern, if you're always with men who won't commit or can't be vulnerable or disappear emotionally just when you need them most, if you look at your relationship history and see a parade of emotionally unavailable men who promised connection but delivered loneliness, I need you to hear this. You are not unlucky. You are not cursed. You are not destined to keep repeating this pattern forever. You are unconsciously choosing these men. And I know that's hard to hear. I know you want to believe it's just bad luck or that all men are like this. But it's not luck. And not all men are like this. You are specifically, consistently, unconsciously attracted to emotionally unavailable men. And until you understand why, until you see the pattern clearly and do the work to change it, you will keep choosing them. Over and over. For the rest of your life. Emotionally unavailable men are everywhere, and they're particularly prevalent in the dating pool after 50. Because by 50, the emotionally healthy men who wanted commitment and partnership, most of them found it. They're in long-term relationships or marriages. What's left in the dating pool after 50 is disproportionately men who are emotionally unavailable. Men who've been married multiple times and never learned how to be present. Men who've been single their whole lives because they can't handle intimacy. Men who are recently divorced and not ready for anything real. Men who are looking for companionship but not connection. Men who want the benefits of a relationship without the vulnerability. So yes, there are more emotionally unavailable men available after 50. But that doesn't explain why you keep choosing them. Because here's the truth. Even in a dating pool full of emotionally unavailable men, there are still emotionally available ones. Men who want real connection, who are capable of vulnerability, who are ready for partnership. But you don't choose them. You don't even see them, because you're not attracted to them. The emotionally available man who's interested in you, who's kind and present and ready, he bores you. He feels too easy, too available, too interested. And so you overlook him. You friend zone him. You tell yourself there's no chemistry, and you chase the man who's distant, ambiguous, hot and cold, the man who keeps you guessing, the man who gives you just enough attention to keep you hooked, but never enough to make you feel secure. That's the man you want. That's the man you're attracted to. And that pattern, that consistent attraction to emotional unavailability, is not about the men. It's about you. Psychologist Walter Riso, who has spent decades studying relationship patterns and why people choose the partners they choose, teaches something that might be painful to hear. He says that we don't attract what we want. We attract what we are. Or more specifically, we attract what matches our unconscious beliefs about ourselves and love. If you keep attracting emotionally unavailable men, it's not because that's all that's out there. It's because some part of you, some unconscious part, believes that's what you deserve, or that's what love looks like, or that's what feels familiar. And until you change those unconscious beliefs, until you heal whatever is driving you to choose emotional unavailability, you will keep attracting it. No matter how many different men you date, no matter how much you swear this time will be different, the pattern will repeat because the pattern is not about them, it's about you. And here's what makes this pattern particularly devastating after 50. You don't have unlimited time anymore. You're not 25 with decades to figure this out. You're 50, 60, 70. And every year you spend in the pattern, every relationship you waste on an emotionally unavailable man, that's a year you don't get back. A year you could have spent with someone who was actually available, or alone and at peace. But instead, you spent it chasing someone who was never going to give you what you need. And at some point, you have to ask yourself, how many more years am I willing to waste on this pattern? How many more emotionally unavailable men am I going to choose before I do the work to understand why I keep choosing them? Today, I'm going to show you exactly why you keep attracting emotionally unavailable men. Not surface reasons like I just have bad taste or all men are emotionally unavailable, but the deep psychological reasons, the unconscious beliefs, the childhood wounds, the attachment patterns, the parts of you that are drawn to emotional unavailability like a moth to a flame. Then I'm going to show you how to recognize emotional unavailability early, before you waste months or years on someone who can't give you what you need. And finally, I'm going to give you the specific internal work you need to do to transform this pattern. To become the kind of woman who's attracted to emotional availability instead of unavailability. To break the cycle once and for all. This is not going to be comfortable, because what I'm going to tell you is that the pattern is your responsibility. Not your fault, but your responsibility. The men you've been with, yes, they're responsible for their behavior, but you're responsible for choosing them, for staying with them, for ignoring the red flags, for convincing yourself they'd change. And until you take responsibility for your part in the pattern, you can't change it. You'll just keep being a victim of it. And victim is not a powerful position. Responsibility is. But before we dive in, I need you to do something. If you're a woman over 50 who keeps attracting emotionally unavailable men, if you're tired of the pattern and ready to understand why it keeps happening, if you're willing to do the uncomfortable work of looking at your part in this, subscribe to this channel right now. This is Enough and Whole. This is where we do the deep psychological work that actually transforms patterns. We don't do surface-level advice here. We go to the root, subscribe, turn on notifications, and let's break this pattern together. Now let's begin. Let's understand why you keep choosing emotional unavailability. And let's learn how to stop. The 5 psychological reasons you keep choosing emotional unavailability. Before you can stop attracting emotionally unavailable men, you need to understand why you're attracted to them in the first place. Because the attraction is not random. It's not bad luck. It's deeply psychological. There are specific reasons rooted in your history and your unconscious beliefs that make emotionally unavailable men feel right to you, feel like home, feel like love. And until you understand those reasons, you'll keep choosing them even when you consciously know you shouldn't. Reason 1. Emotionally unavailable feels familiar. The first reason you keep attracting emotionally unavailable men is the most fundamental. Emotional unavailability feels familiar. And familiar feels like love. If you grew up with a parent who was emotionally unavailable, who was physically present but emotionally distant, who you could never quite reach or connect with, then emotional unavailability is what you learned love looks like. Your father, who was always working and never talked about feelings. Your mother, who was depressed or anxious and emotionally absent. That was your first experience of love. And your nervous system coded it as what love feels like. So now, when you meet an emotionally available man who's present and vulnerable and consistent, it doesn't register as love. It feels foreign, uncomfortable, wrong. But when you meet an emotionally unavailable man who's distant and hard to reach, your nervous system says, yes, this is it. This feels like love. Because it matches the template you learned in childhood. And you're drawn to it not because it's good for you, but because it's familiar. And familiar feels safe even when it's actually destructive. Walter Riso teaches that this is why logic doesn't work. You can know intellectually that emotional unavailability is bad for you. You can see the pattern clearly. You can tell yourself you're going to choose differently this time. But when you meet an emotionally unavailable man, your nervous system overrides your logic. Because to your nervous system, familiar equals safe, and emotional unavailability is familiar. So you choose it again, convinced this time will be different. But the pattern repeats because you're still choosing based on what feels familiar, not what's actually good for you. This is what happened to Patricia. She's 68 years old. Her father was a successful businessman who worked 70 hours a week. He provided financially, gave her everything materially. But emotionally, he was absent. Patricia spent her entire childhood trying to get his attention, trying to make him proud, trying to get him to really see her. And no matter what she did, No matter how many achievements she racked up, he was always working, always distant, always emotionally unavailable. Now, at 68, Patricia has been married twice and dated dozens of men, and every single one has been emotionally unavailable. Her first husband was a workaholic just like her father. Her second husband was physically present, but emotionally shut down. The men she's dated since her second divorce all the same. Distant, hard to reach, emotionally closed off. And Patricia kept telling herself it was just coincidence, just bad luck. But when she finally sat down and looked at the pattern, she realized something painful. She was choosing men who felt like her father, because that's what her nervous system had learned love feels like. Patricia told me, "I thought I wanted an emotionally available man. I thought I was looking for someone present and communicative. But every time I met someone like that, I felt nothing. No attraction, no chemistry. And every time I met someone distant and hard to reach, something in me lit up. I wanted to win them over, to make them see me, to get them to be present. And I realized I was still trying to win with these men, what I couldn't win with my father. I was choosing familiarity over health, and familiarity was killing me." The transformation for Patricia began when she understood this. When she stopped blaming the men and started looking at why she was attracted to them in the first place. She had to grieve the emotionally available father she never had. She had to accept that she'll never get what she needed from him. And she had to retrain her nervous system to recognize that emotional unavailability is not love. It's just familiar, and familiar is not the same as good. Reason 2, you're trying to heal an old wound. The second reason you keep attracting emotionally unavailable men is that you're unconsciously trying to heal an old wound. If you had a parent who was emotionally unavailable, you spent your childhood trying to get them to see you, to choose you, to be present with you. And you never succeeded. No matter what you did, no matter how hard you tried, you couldn't make them emotionally available. And that created a wound. A deep wound that says, "I'm not worthy of someone's full presence." And now, decades later, you're still trying to heal that wound. But instead of healing it directly, you're recreating it. You're choosing emotionally unavailable men and trying to make them available. Trying to be good enough, interesting enough, valuable enough that this time, finally, someone will choose to be present with you. You're trying to win with this man what you couldn't win with your parent. And if you can get this emotionally unavailable man to commit, to open up, to be vulnerable, then you'll finally prove that you're worthy. You'll heal the wound. But it doesn't work that way. You can't heal a childhood wound by winning with a substitute person. Even if you succeed, even if you make this emotionally unavailable man commit, it won't heal the wound. Because the wound is not about him. It's about your parent. And until you grieve what you didn't get from your parent and stop trying to get it from romantic partners, you'll keep choosing emotionally unavailable men to reenact the wound instead of healing it. This is the trap that so many women over 50 fall into. They've spent their entire lives trying to heal the wound by finding someone who will finally choose them, finally see them, finally be present with them. And they think if they just find the right person, if they just try hard enough, if they're just good enough, they'll get what they've been seeking their whole lives. But the wound doesn't heal that way. It heals through grief, through acceptance, through stopping the cycle of reenactment and actually feeling the loss of what you never got. Walter Riso explains this using attachment theory. If you had an anxious attachment style as a child, constantly seeking reassurance from an emotionally unavailable parent, you carry that same pattern into adulthood. You seek emotionally unavailable partners because they trigger the same anxiety, the same desperate need for reassurance that you felt as a child. And every time they give you a crumb of attention, a moment of presence, it feels like winning. Like finally getting what you've been chasing your whole life. But it's not healing. It's just temporary relief from anxiety. And as soon as they pull away again, which they always do because they're emotionally unavailable, the anxiety returns. and you're back to chasing, back to trying to win, back to reenacting the wound instead of healing it. Let me tell you about Susan. She's 63. Susan's mother was severely depressed throughout Susan's childhood, physically present but emotionally absent. Susan learned early that she had to take care of her mother's emotions. She had to be good, be quiet, not cause problems, and she spent her entire childhood hoping that if she was good enough, her mother would finally be happy. Finally, be present. Finally give Susan the emotional attention she needed. But it never happened. No matter how good Susan was, her mother stayed in her depression, stayed emotionally unavailable. Now, at 63, Susan has spent 40 years choosing emotionally unavailable men. Men who are depressed, men who are struggling, men who need to be taken care of. And Susan pours herself into these men. She supports them. She nurtures them. She tries to fix them, hoping that if she's just supportive enough, just patient enough, just loving enough, they'll heal. They'll become available. They'll give her the presence and attention she's been seeking since childhood. But it never works. These men either stay emotionally unavailable, taking Susan's support without giving anything back, or they heal and leave. They get stronger and move on to someone else, and Susan is left alone again, wondering why she's not enough, why her love and support couldn't make them stay, why she can't heal them into being available. Susan told me, "I thought I was being a good partner. I thought if I just loved them enough, supported them enough, they'd become the partner I needed. But I was just recreating my relationship with my mother. Choosing men I had to take care of, hoping that my caretaking would make them love me. But it never did, because I was trying to heal a wound that had nothing to do with them. And I was exhausting myself in relationships that were never going to give me what I needed." Susan's transformation required her to stop choosing men she needed to fix, to stop trying to heal her mother wound through romantic partners, to grieve the emotionally available mother she never had, and to accept that she deserves a partner who doesn't need fixing, who's already emotionally available, who can give instead of just take. It took 2 years of therapy and hard internal work. But Susan did it. And now, at 65, she's dating an emotionally available man for the first time in her life. And she's learning what it feels like to be in a relationship where she's not the only one giving. Reason 3. Emotional unavailability protects you from intimacy. The third reason, and this one is hard to face, is that you're attracted to emotionally unavailable men because their unavailability protects you from real intimacy. Because here's the truth, most women don't want to admit. You're afraid of intimacy too, not consciously. Consciously you say you want connection, you want vulnerability, you want partnership. But unconsciously, intimacy terrifies you. Because intimacy requires you to be seen, really seen, with all your flaws and fears and wounds, and being seen feels dangerous. So you choose men who can't see you. Men who are too emotionally unavailable to get close enough to really know you. And then you can blame them for the lack of intimacy. You can say, "I wanted connection, but he couldn't give it to me." And you never have to face your own fear of being known. You never have to risk the vulnerability of real intimacy. Because he's unavailable, you're protected. You get to stay safe behind the complaint that he won't connect while never having to face your own terror of connection. Walter Riso teaches that this is often why women who claim they want emotional availability feel bored or turned off when they meet emotionally available men. They say there's no chemistry, but what they're really feeling is fear. The emotionally available man is too available, too ready to know them, too willing to be vulnerable. And that triggers their unconscious fear of intimacy. So they run. They tell themselves the available man is boring, and they chase the unavailable man who keeps them safe from the intimacy they're afraid of. This is one of the most difficult truths to face, because it means you're not just a victim of emotionally unavailable men. You're complicit. You're choosing them for a reason, and the reason is that you're protecting yourself from being known, from being rejected. from the vulnerability that real intimacy requires. And until you face that fear, until you're willing to risk being seen, you'll keep choosing unavailability. Not because you want it, but because you're afraid of the alternative. Think about this honestly. When you meet an emotionally available man, what do you feel? Do you feel excited, attracted, or do you feel uncomfortable, anxious, like something is wrong? Most women in this pattern feel uncomfortable with availability, because availability means the possibility of real intimacy. And real intimacy means the risk of being fully known and then rejected, which is the deepest fear. Not being rejected by someone who doesn't really know you, but being rejected by someone who knows all of you, who sees your wounds and your flaws and your darkness and says, "I don't want this." So you protect yourself by choosing men who will never get close enough to really see you. Men who are too emotionally unavailable to know the real you. And yes, it's lonely. Yes, it's painful. But it's safer than the risk of being fully known and rejected. That's the unconscious calculus. Better to be lonely with someone who doesn't see you than to be rejected by someone who does. Let me tell you about Karen. She's 60. Karen has been divorced for 15 years. And in those 15 years, she's dated a lot of men. But every relationship follows the same pattern. She meets a man. There's attraction. They start dating. And as soon as he starts to get close, as soon as he starts asking real questions and wanting to know her deeply, Karen pulls away. She finds reasons to end it. She says he's too needy, too clingy, too intense. And she moves on to someone new. And the men she moves on to, they're always emotionally unavailable. Men who keep her at arm's length. Men who don't ask deep questions. Men who are content with surface-level connection. And with these men, Karen stays. For months. Sometimes years. Complaining the whole time that they won't connect. That they won't be vulnerable. That they won't let her in. But the truth, which Karen finally had to face, is that she doesn't want them to let her in, because if they did, she'd have to let them in too. And that terrifies her. Karen told me, "I spent 15 years complaining about emotionally unavailable men, blaming them for the lack of connection. But when I really looked at the pattern, I had to face something painful. Every time a man tried to get close, I ran. Every time someone was emotionally available, I felt trapped. I was choosing unavailable men, not because that's all that was available, but because their unavailability protected me from having to be vulnerable, from having to risk being really seen and maybe rejected. Karen's transformation required her to face her fear of intimacy head on, to ask herself what she was really afraid of, and the answer was rejection. If someone really knew her, all of her, they'd see that she's not enough, not interesting enough, not valuable enough, not worth staying for. So better to keep people at a distance, better to be lonely than rejected after being fully known. But here's what Karen learned. The fear of rejection was worse than actual rejection. She was already living as if she'd been rejected, keeping herself isolated, keeping relationships surface level, living in loneliness to avoid the possibility of rejection. And once she realized that, she decided to take the risk, to let herself be known, to choose emotionally available men and let them see her. And yes, some rejected her, but some didn't. And the ones who didn't, the ones who saw her fully and stayed, those relationships were worth every risk. Reason 4. You believe love requires suffering. The fourth reason you keep attracting emotionally unavailable men is that you believe unconsciously that love requires suffering. That if it's not hard, it's not real. That struggle equals passion. That pain equals depth. And emotionally unavailable men provide plenty of suffering, plenty of struggle. You're constantly anxious about where you stand, constantly trying to figure out if they care, constantly waiting for texts that don't come, promises that don't materialize, commitments that don't happen. And all that struggle feels like love, because you've confused intensity with intimacy, anxiety with passion, suffering with depth. But an emotionally available man, he's easy. He texts back. He keeps commitments. He's clear about his feelings. There's no drama, no anxiety, no struggle. And to you, that feels boring, empty, not real. Because you've learned that real love is supposed to hurt, supposed to require constant effort, supposed to keep you on edge. And so you choose emotional unavailability because the suffering it creates feels like proof that it matters, that it's real love, when actually the suffering is just suffering, not love. This belief often comes from your first experience of love. If you grew up in a household where love was conditional, where you had to earn affection, where relationships were dramatic and chaotic, then you learned that love equals struggle. You learned that you have to fight for love, work for it, suffer for it. And if it comes easily, if someone just gives you love without making you work for it, it doesn't feel real. It doesn't feel valuable. Because you've been taught that valuable things require suffering to obtain. Walter Riso talks about this extensively. He calls it the myth of romantic suffering, the belief that real love is supposed to hurt, that passion requires pain, that if you're not suffering, you're not really in love. And this myth destroys relationships because it makes healthy, stable, peaceful love feel boring. It makes you chase intensity instead of intimacy, drama instead of depth. And it keeps you stuck in relationships with emotionally unavailable men who provide plenty of suffering but no real love. This myth is everywhere in our culture, in movies and songs and books. The dramatic love story where the couple overcomes obstacles and fights and pain. The passionate romance that's intense and consuming and tumultuous. We romanticize suffering. We call it passion. We say things like, if it's easy, it's not meant to be, or real love is worth fighting for. And those messages teach you that love should be hard, should be painful, should require suffering. And so when you meet someone who makes love easy, you think something's wrong. You think it's not real. And you go back to chasing suffering. Let me tell you about Lisa. She's 58. Lisa grew up watching her parents fight constantly, dramatic arguments, days of silent treatment, then passionate makeups. That was her template for love. Love equals intensity. Love equals drama. Love equals suffering followed by brief moments of connection. And Lisa carried that template into every relationship she's ever had. Lisa has been married 3 times, and every marriage followed the same pattern. Intense attraction, passionate beginning, then conflict, drama, emotional unavailability, suffering, brief makeups, more suffering. And Lisa stayed in each marriage for years because the suffering felt like passion, the drama felt like depth. The struggle felt like proof that it mattered, that she mattered, that the relationship was real. But the truth was, Lisa was addicted to the intensity, to the anxiety, to the drama. She confused emotional chaos with emotional connection, and she couldn't recognize healthy love because healthy love felt boring to her, felt empty, felt like nothing was happening. After her 3rd divorce, Lisa dated an emotionally available man. He was kind, consistent, communicative, no drama, no games, no emotional unavailability. And Lisa lasted 3 weeks before she ended it. She told her friends he was boring. There was no chemistry, no spark, nothing exciting about him. And she went back to dating emotionally unavailable men. Men who created the drama and intensity she'd learned to confuse with love. Lisa told me, I thought boring meant wrong. I thought if I wasn't anxious, if I wasn't constantly wondering where I stood, if I wasn't fighting for his attention, then it wasn't real. But what I was calling boring was actually peace. What I was calling chemistry was actually anxiety. I was so addicted to the intensity of emotional unavailability that I couldn't recognize healthy love when it was right in front of me. Lisa's transformation required her to detox from intensity, to learn that peace is not boring, that stability is not empty, that a relationship without drama can have depth, that love doesn't require suffering. It took her a year of being single. A year of learning to be okay without the anxiety and intensity she'd been addicted to. A year of retraining her nervous system to recognize that calm can be passionate, that peace can be profound, that easy doesn't mean meaningless. And now, at 60, Lisa is dating someone emotionally available, and she's learning what healthy love feels like. It's not boring. It's peaceful. It's not empty. It's stable. It's not meaningless. It's deep. Just in a different way than the intensity she used to chase. And Lisa is discovering that she likes peace better than drama. She likes stability better than chaos. She likes being with someone who's present instead of someone who makes her suffer. Reason 5. Low self-worth after 50. The fifth reason, specific to women over 50, is that your self-worth has been damaged by aging in a culture that devalues older women. And low self-worth attracts unavailability. Because when you don't believe you're valuable, when you don't believe you deserve someone's full presence and commitment, you settle for crumbs. You accept emotional unavailability because you think that's the best you can get. You think, I'm 60. I should be grateful anyone wants me at all. Even if they only want me part-time. Even if they can't be vulnerable. Even if they won't commit. At least it's something. And emotionally unavailable men can sense that low self-worth. They're drawn to women who will accept unavailability because it's convenient. They can get companionship, sex, emotional support when they want it without having to give much in return. Because you're grateful for whatever you get, you won't demand more. You won't require reciprocity. You've already decided you're not valuable enough to deserve full availability, so they don't have to give it. Walter Riso teaches that transforming this pattern requires building self-worth. Not just intellectually knowing you're valuable, but deeply believing it. Believing it so much that emotional unavailability becomes unacceptable. That you'd rather be alone than accept half presence from someone. That you know you deserve full availability and you won't settle for less. And once you believe that, once your self-worth is solid, emotionally unavailable men stop being attractive because you can see them for what they are. Not mysterious or challenging, just unavailable. And unavailable is not interesting to a woman who knows her worth. This is the devastating impact of ageism on women's dating lives after 50. Society tells you you're invisible, that your value has expired, that you should be grateful for any attention. And if you internalize those messages, if you believe them, you make yourself available to men who don't value you. Men who want the benefits of your company without the commitment. Men who are emotionally unavailable because they know you won't demand availability, because you don't think you deserve it. And here's the cruel cycle. The more you accept emotional unavailability, the more your self-worth erodes. Because every time you settle for crumbs, you're telling yourself you're only worth crumbs. Every time you accept half presence, you're confirming that you don't deserve full presence. Every time you stay with someone who won't commit, you're believing you're not worthy of commitment. And your self-worth gets lower and lower, making you more and more likely to accept less and less. Until you're in relationships that give you almost nothing, and you're grateful for it. Breaking this cycle requires radical self-worth work. It requires rejecting the cultural narrative that you're less valuable because you're older. It requires building evidence of your worth that has nothing to do with whether men want you. It requires learning to value yourself enough that you'd rather be alone than undervalued by someone else. Let me tell you about Michelle. She's 62. Michelle got divorced at 55 after a 30-year marriage. And when she entered the dating world at 55, she was shocked. The men her age were dating women in their 30s and 40s. The men who were interested in her were men she wasn't attracted to, or men who were clearly looking for something casual. And Michelle started to internalize the message that at 55, she wasn't valuable anymore. So when Michelle met Tom, a 60-year-old man who was recently divorced and emotionally unavailable, she was grateful. Grateful that someone wanted her, grateful that someone found her attractive, grateful that she wasn't going to be alone. And she accepted Tom's emotional unavailability without question. He wouldn't commit. He wouldn't define the relationship. He disappeared for days without explanation. He kept Michelle separate from his life, his friends, his family. But Michelle accepted all of it, because she believed that at 55, then 56, then 57, she was lucky to have anyone at all. Michelle spent 5 years with Tom, 5 years accepting crumbs, 5 years grateful for half presents, 5 years in a relationship that gave her almost nothing. And her self-worth got lower and lower, until Michelle was 60 years old and felt completely worthless. She believed no one else would want her, that Tom was the best she could get, that she should just be grateful he stuck around even though he wouldn't commit. But then something happened. Michelle's daughter, who was 30, was in an emotionally unavailable relationship, and Michelle watched her daughter suffer, watched her accept crumbs, watched her settle for half presents. And Michelle told her daughter, "You deserve better than this. You're valuable. You should never settle for someone who won't commit to you fully." And her daughter said, "Mom, you're doing the exact same thing with Tom." And Michelle had to face the truth. She was teaching her daughter that it's okay to accept emotional unavailability, that it's okay to settle, that women should be grateful for crumbs. And she didn't want that for her daughter. She didn't want her daughter to spend 5 years, 10 years, 20 years accepting unavailability because she didn't think she deserved better. And if she didn't want that for her daughter, why was she accepting it for herself? Michelle ended the relationship with Tom, and she spent 2 years single, 2 years working on her self-worth, 2 years learning that her value has nothing to do with whether men her age want to date younger women. 2 years building evidence of her worth, her intelligence, her humor, her kindness, her strength, her experience, her wisdom. 2 years learning to prefer being alone to being undervalued. And now, at 62, Michelle is dating an emotionally available man. A man who's 65 and knows exactly what he wants, who commits, who's consistent, who integrates Michelle into his life, who values her. And Michelle is learning what it feels like to be in a relationship where she's not settling, where she's not accepting crumbs, where she's valued fully. And she told me, "I wasted 5 years with Tom because I didn't think I deserved better. But I do deserve better. And so does every woman over 50. We don't become less valuable as we age. We become more valuable. And we should never settle for men who don't see that." The 12 red flags of emotional unavailability. Now that you understand why you're attracted to emotionally unavailable men, you need to learn how to recognize them early. Because most women waste months, even years, with emotionally unavailable men before they finally admit what they're dealing with. They ignore red flags, make excuses, convince themselves the man just needs time or the right woman or will change once he feels safe. But emotionally unavailable men don't change just because you wait longer or love harder. They change only if they choose to do the internal work. And most don't choose to. So you need to recognize unavailability early and walk away before you're invested. Red flag 1. They move fast physically but slow emotionally. He wants sex immediately, wants to spend every night together. But when you try to have a real conversation about feelings or future or where this is going, he deflects, changes the subject, says it's too soon to talk about that. He'll move as fast as you let him on the physical level. But emotionally, he stays distant. This disconnect between physical intimacy and emotional intimacy is a clear sign of unavailability. Because emotionally available men want both. They want physical connection and emotional connection. But emotionally unavailable men want the physical without the emotional. They want the pleasure and companionship without the vulnerability and commitment. So they rush the physical to create a sense of closeness without actually being close. Red flag 2. They're vague about their life. You don't know much about his past, his family, his previous relationships. He gives vague answers when you ask. Not because he's private, but because sharing real information creates intimacy. And intimacy is what he's avoiding. When you ask about his family, he says we're not that close. When you ask about his previous relationships, he says it's complicated. When you ask about his childhood, he says it was fine. He gives you nothing real, nothing specific, nothing that would allow you to actually know him. And the vagueness keeps you at a distance, keeps the relationship surface level, which is exactly where he wants it. Red flag 3. They won't define the relationship. You've been dating for months, and you still don't know what you are. When you ask, he says, why do we need labels? Can't we just enjoy each other? He wants the benefits of a relationship without the commitment of defining it. Because defining it means accountability. Defining it means he can't keep his options open. Defining it means he has to actually commit. And commitment is what emotionally unavailable men avoid. So they keep things ambiguous. They keep you in limbo. Never quite committed, never quite casual, just undefined, which allows them to have the benefits without the responsibility. Red flag 4. They're inconsistent. One day he's all in, texting constantly, making plans. The next week, he disappears. This hot and cold pattern is not about his busy life. It's about his inability to sustain emotional presence. He can do it in bursts, but he can't maintain it. And the inconsistency keeps you anxious, keeps you off balance, keeps you chasing, which is exactly what he wants. Because your anxiety about the relationship means he stays in control. You're always trying to figure out where you stand, always trying to get back to the intensity of the good days. And he never has to actually commit because you're too busy trying to stabilize the relationship to demand commitment. Red flag 5. They don't introduce you to their life. You don't meet his friends, his family, his children if he has them. You exist in a compartment, separate from the rest of his life, because integrating you would make the relationship real. And he wants to keep it casual even if he's acting serious. He'll spend time with you, have deep conversations, even say he cares about you, but he won't bring you into his actual life, won't let his people know about you, won't make you part of his world, because that would mean commitment, and commitment is what he's avoiding. Red flag 6. They talk about their ex constantly, either positively or negatively. Either way, their ex is still occupying emotional space, and that space is not available for you. He's still processing the previous relationship, still attached, still not available for something new. If he talks about his ex positively, saying how great she was, how much he misses what they had, you're competing with a ghost. You'll never measure up to the idealized version of her in his head. If he talks about his ex negatively, blaming her for everything, saying how damaged he is from that relationship, he's not healed. He's not ready. And you'll pay for her sins. Red flag 7. They say they're not ready for a relationship. Believe them. When a man tells you he's not ready, he's not ready. He's not going to become ready because you're patient or special or different. He's telling you who he is. Listen, don't make excuses. Don't tell yourself he'll change his mind once he sees how great you are. Don't wait around hoping he'll be ready eventually. He's not ready. And if you choose to stay with someone who's told you they're not ready, you're choosing to waste your time. Red flag 8. They cancel plans frequently. And always with a reason that sounds legitimate. Work emergency, family issue, not feeling well. But the pattern is what matters. Consistent canceling means you're not a priority. You're an option he exercises when nothing better is happening. An emotionally available man who values you will keep his commitments, will make time for you, will prioritize you. An emotionally unavailable man will cancel whenever something more important comes up, or whenever he feels like being alone, or whenever committing to plans starts to feel like too much. Red flag 9. They won't discuss feelings. When you try to talk about how you feel or ask how they feel, they shut down, get defensive, accuse you of being too intense or too demanding. Emotional conversations are threatening to emotionally unavailable men. They'll avoid them at all costs. They'll say you're overthinking, analyzing too much, making things too complicated. But what you're doing is trying to have a normal relationship conversation. And their refusal to engage emotionally is a clear sign of unavailability. Red flag 10. They're commitment phobic about small things. Not just big commitments like marriage, small ones. Making plans more than a week in advance. Agreeing to regular date nights. Keeping a toothbrush at your place. They resist any structure or commitment because commitment means they can't escape easily. And emotionally unavailable men always want an escape route. They want to be able to disappear without consequence, to pull away without explanation. And commitment, even small commitment, makes that harder. Red flag 11. They say you're too much, too emotional, too needy, too demanding. When actually, you're just asking for normal relationship things like consistency, communication, commitment. But to them, normal is too much, because they're not capable of normal. So they make you feel like you're the problem, like you're asking for too much, like you're being unreasonable, when actually, you're just asking for what any healthy relationship should provide. Red flag 12. Your gut tells you something is off. You feel anxious more than peaceful. You're constantly wondering where you stand. You're always waiting for the other shoe to drop. Your gut knows he's unavailable, even if your mind is making excuses. Trust your gut. Let me tell you about Linda. She's 61. She dated a man for 8 months. He had every single one of these red flags, but Linda ignored all of them. He said he wasn't ready for a relationship, but Linda thought she could make him ready. He was inconsistent, but Linda made excuses. He wouldn't define the relationship, but Linda told herself he just needed time. 8 months later, he ended it. Said exactly what he'd said at the beginning, "I'm not ready for a relationship." And Linda was devastated, not just because it ended, but because she'd wasted 8 months ignoring red flags she could see from day one. Linda told me every red flag was there from the beginning, but I ignored them because I wanted it to work. I convinced myself he'd change, but he didn't. He told me who he was on day one. I just didn't want to believe him. That's the lesson. When you see red flags, walk away. Immediately. Don't wait to see if they change. They won't. The internal work required to attract emotional availability. Understanding why you attract emotionally unavailable men and how to recognize them is necessary. But it's not sufficient to transform the pattern. Because even when you know why and you can spot the red flags, you'll still be attracted to them. Your nervous system will still say yes to unavailability and no to availability. So transforming the pattern requires internal work. Deep work on healing the wounds that make unavailability feel like love. On building the self-worth that makes availability attractive. On becoming the kind of woman who's drawn to emotional health instead of emotional dysfunction. The first work, grieve what you didn't get. The first work is grieving. If your attraction to emotional unavailability comes from having an emotionally unavailable parent, you need to grieve what you didn't get from that parent. You need to stop trying to get it from romantic partners. And that requires grieving, feeling the sadness of having a parent who couldn't see you, who couldn't be present with you, who couldn't give you what you needed. You've probably spent your whole life avoiding this grief, staying busy, staying distracted, choosing emotionally unavailable men to recreate the wound instead of grieving it. But you can't heal what you won't grieve. You have to feel the loss. You have to let yourself be sad about what you didn't get. And you have to accept that you'll never get it from that parent. They can't give you what they don't have. And trying to get it from substitutes, from romantic partners who are also unavailable, just keeps you stuck in the wound. So grieve. Let yourself feel it. And once you grieve it, once you accept the loss, you can stop trying to heal it by choosing unavailable men. Grief looks different for everyone. For some women, it means crying. Finally, letting yourself feel the sadness you've been holding for decades. For some, it means anger. Letting yourself be angry at the parent who wasn't present, who didn't give you what you needed. For some, it means writing letters you'll never send, saying everything you wish you could have said. For some, it means therapy, having someone witness your grief and help you process it. But however you grieve, the essential step is the same. You have to stop avoiding the pain. Stop numbing it with busyness or relationships or alcohol or work or shopping or whatever your numbing method is. You have to feel it, all of it. The sadness, the anger, the loss, the longing for what you never got. And you have to accept that what you needed, you didn't get. And you never will. Not from that parent. Not from a romantic partner who's a stand-in for that parent. The only place you can get it now is from yourself. The second work, build self-worth independent of relationships. The second work is building self-worth that exists independent of whether anyone chooses you. Because if your worth depends on being chosen, you'll accept being chosen by anyone, even someone who's emotionally unavailable. But if your worth is internal, if you know you're valuable whether anyone sees it or not, you can be selective. You can require availability. You can walk away from unavailability without feeling like you're losing your last chance. Building self-worth requires daily practice. Every day, you identify things about yourself that are valuable, that have nothing to do with relationships. Your intelligence, your kindness, your creativity, your resilience, your humor. You build evidence of your worth, and you practice saying no to things that don't honor your worth, including relationships with emotionally unavailable men. Every time you say no to unavailability, you're telling yourself, I'm valuable enough to require availability. And over time, you start to believe it. This is hard work, especially after 50, especially in a culture that tells you your value has expired. But your worth is not dependent on your age, or your relationship status, or whether men want you. Your worth is inherent. You were born valuable. You'll die valuable. And everything in between, including your relationship status, doesn't change that fundamental truth. Practice this daily. Every morning, list 3 things about yourself that are valuable. Not things about your appearance, not things about whether you're in a relationship, but things about who you are, your character, your skills, your qualities. Write them down. Say them out loud. Let yourself hear that you are valuable. And when you're tempted to accept emotional unavailability, when you're tempted to settle for crumbs, remind yourself of your value. Would a valuable woman accept this? Would a valuable woman settle for half presence? Would a valuable woman waste her time on someone who won't commit? No. A valuable woman requires full availability, and you are a valuable woman. The third work, develop comfort with being alone. The third work is becoming comfortable being alone. Because if you're terrified of being alone, you'll accept any relationship to avoid it, including relationships with emotionally unavailable men. But if you're okay alone, if being alone feels peaceful instead of terrifying, you can be selective. You can wait for availability instead of settling for crumbs. Developing comfort with being alone requires practice, spending time alone intentionally, doing things alone, being with yourself without constant distraction, and discovering that being alone is not death. It's just different, and sometimes it's better than being with someone who's emotionally absent. Because at least when you're alone, you're not pretending there's connection when there isn't. You're just alone, and alone can be peaceful. Most women over 50 are terrified of being alone. Not because being alone is actually terrible, but because they've never learned how to be alone. They went from their parents' house to a relationship, to marriage, to motherhood. And they've never spent significant time alone, so alone feels terrifying. Unknown. Like a black hole that will swallow them. But alone is not a black hole. Alone is just alone. And once you learn to be comfortable alone, once you discover that you can be happy alone, everything changes. Because then you're choosing relationships from desire, not desperation. You're choosing to be with someone because they add to your life, not because you can't stand being alone. And that completely changes the power dynamic. You're no longer willing to accept unavailability just to avoid being alone. Because being alone is fine. Being with someone who's emotionally unavailable is not. The fourth work. Retrain your nervous system to recognize availability as attractive. Your nervous system currently codes emotional unavailability as love, but you can retrain it. Every time you meet an emotionally available man and feel bored, you pause. You notice the feeling, and you ask yourself, is this boredom or is this peace? Because what you're calling boring might actually be the absence of anxiety, the absence of drama, the presence of consistency, and those things feel boring because you've confused anxiety with attraction. But they're actually what healthy love feels like, so you practice. You spend time with emotionally available men even when you don't feel instant chemistry. You give availability a chance. You notice what it feels like to be with someone who's consistent, who communicates, who's present. And you let your nervous system learn a new pattern. This is what love feels like. Not the anxiety and drama of unavailability, but the peace and consistency of availability. This retraining takes time. Your nervous system has been coding unavailability as love for decades. You can't change that overnight, but you can change it gradually. Every time you choose differently, every time you give availability a chance, every time you recognize that peace is not boring, you're retraining your nervous system. And eventually, availability starts to feel attractive, starts to feel right, starts to feel like love. The fifth work. Heal your fear of intimacy. If you're choosing emotionally unavailable men to protect yourself from intimacy, you need to face that fear. You need to ask yourself, what am I afraid will happen if someone really sees me? Usually the fear is rejection. If they really know me, they'll leave. But here's the truth. If they're going to leave, they're going to leave whether they know you or not. Hiding doesn't protect you. It just prevents real connection. So you practice vulnerability. You let yourself be seen. You share things you're afraid to share. And you discover that being known doesn't destroy you. Some people will reject you, but some won't. And the ones who don't, the ones who see you and stay, those are the relationships worth having. And you can't find them if you're hiding behind emotionally unavailable men who can't see you anyway. Vulnerability is terrifying, especially if you've been hurt before, especially if you've been rejected after being vulnerable. But the alternative to vulnerability is isolation. Is surface-level relationships that never go deep. Is spending your life protecting yourself from connection while desperately wanting it. And that's no way to live. Let me tell you about Barbara. She's 59. She spent 40 years choosing emotionally unavailable men. Over and over. Different men. Same pattern. At 59, after another failed relationship with another unavailable man, Barbara finally asked herself, why do I keep doing this? And she started therapy. She did all 5 pieces of the work. She grieved her emotionally unavailable father. She built self-worth. She became comfortable being alone. She retrained her nervous system. She healed her fear of intimacy. And at 61, 2 years later, Barbara met someone, an emotionally available man. And her first reaction was, he's boring, no chemistry. But Barbara remembered the work, and she asked herself, is this boring or is this peaceful? And she realized it's peaceful. He's consistent. He communicates. He's present. And that feels foreign because I've never experienced it. But foreign doesn't mean wrong. It might mean healthy. So Barbara gave him a chance. And over months, something shifted. She started to feel attracted to his availability, started to appreciate his consistency, started to value his presence. And now, 3 years later, Barbara is in the healthiest relationship of her life. Not because she found a different type of man, but because she became a different type of woman. A woman who's attracted to emotional availability instead of unavailability. Barbara told me, I spent 40 years choosing unavailable men, and I thought that's just what I was attracted to. But it wasn't attraction, it was trauma. Once I healed the trauma, my attraction changed. Now availability feels like love, and unavailability just feels like unavailability. Conclusion. You've spent years, maybe decades, choosing emotionally unavailable men. And every time you've told yourself, this one will be different. This one will change. This one will finally be the one who stays, who opens up, who commits. But it never happens. Because the pattern is not about finding the right unavailable man. The pattern is about you choosing unavailability in the first place. And until you transform that choice, until you do the internal work that makes availability attractive and unavailability unacceptable, you'll keep choosing it. This transformation is possible. You are not destined to repeat this pattern forever. But the transformation requires work. Real work, grieving work, self-worth work, intimacy work. It requires facing things you've been avoiding, feeling things you've been numbing, changing things that feel hardwired. It's not easy, but it's possible, and it's worth it. Because here's what's waiting on the other side of this transformation: a relationship with someone who's actually available, who's present, who's consistent, who doesn't make you anxious or confused or constantly wondering where you stand. A relationship that feels peaceful instead of dramatic, secure instead of uncertain, real instead of almost. That's what's possible when you stop choosing unavailability. But you have to do the work, and the work starts with honesty. Go to the comments right now. Tell me, do you have this pattern? Do you keep choosing emotionally unavailable men? Just say yes or no. Because naming the pattern is the first step to changing it. And you need to see that you're not alone. Thousands of women over 50 have this pattern. And we're all working to transform it together. Subscribe to this channel if you haven't. Enough and Whole is where we do the deep work of transforming patterns. Share this video with a woman who needs it, someone who's stuck in this pattern, someone who needs to hear that transformation is possible. You are enough. You are whole. And you deserve a man who's emotionally available, who sees you, who chooses you, who stays. Stop settling for unavailability. Do the work. Transform the pattern. Your available relationship is waiting.